All right, so let's pick up with where we left off. We are now looking at the causes and effects of the Great Depression. We've looked at the long term causes, which were the gap between the rich and the poor, the overproduction, the underconsumption, the banking practices, the dust bowls. We looked at the immediate causes, which was buying on margin, which ended up being the stock market crashing. So we have many different causes that have led us into the Great Depression. Uh, and whether they were immediate or long term, they all can be some way connected back to the government. When we look at the overproduction, the underconsumption, the buying on margin, all of that was because we are encouraging business with those high tariffs. That's another cause. And creating that laissez faire stand from the government that gave us the gap between the rich and the poor, that allowed for the poor banking practices, that allowed for the buying on margin. So, really, the government has a huge hand when it comes to the Great Depression and where it came from, where the roots grew from. And there should be no surprise when we start to talk about Hoover. Hoover is going to get the shortest end of the stick when it comes to presidencies. Uh, but we have to give a little bit of background before I throw too much shade. Hoover had served as the Secretary of Commerce under both Harding and Coolidge, so he wasn't undereducated or underexperienced when it comes to the road to the presidency. Hoover's going to run as the Republican nominee in 1928. And the goal here was to continue the prosperity and peace that the Republican Party had taken credit for. And that gives him a clear pathway to winning the presidency. And his slogan, man, hindsight must have been 2020 for him. I see no fear for the future of our country was the slogan that he ran on. And look at these campaign posters. Vote for Hoover. Don't change now. Talking about why would we change parties when the Republican Party has clearly been doing so well. But just 7 short months after taking the presidency, the stock market's going to crash. And Hoover is going to take the stance on the Great Depression, this great crash of the stock market, that it'll revive itself with as little government involvement as possible, taking a page out of the books of his predecessors that the presidency should not be used to fix economic or social problems. Hands off, laissez faire is the best approach. So when we look at Hoover's response to the Great Depression, it's going to be simple. He's going to tell the wealthy, why don't you guys start to spend some money? That'll help us combat the depression. Why doesn't the wealthy voluntarily supply goods and donate money to charities? And you could probably guess how well that went over, about as good as a lead balloon. The wealthy aren't going to want to volunteer their money, their support, goods. They're going to want to hold on to what they have so that they don't become like those that have lost everything. So, what we're going to see is as more people lose their homes, shanty towns are going to spring up around the nation, like you can see in the pictures. People can't afford to pay their mortgages for those fancy homes in the suburbs anymore. So, they have to move out. They can't pay rent. So, they'll build their own homes out of basically whatever they can find in the streets and live there. And these shanty towns take the name of Hoovervilles to throw some shade at the president, to take the president's name, who is ignoring what these people are going through, and put it with the suffering of the everyday American. Hoover's attempt to fix the economy was his theory of trickle-down economics. Now, Hoover didn't come up with trickle-down. This is not a brand new idea, but this is his approach to fixing the Great Depression. He says, okay, let's throw money at the top of the economic pyramid, which is the wealthy, okay? He's saying, let's throw money at the wealthy in the hopes that this money is going to reach the bottom, the biggest part, the base, the incredibly poverty-stricken part of the nation. But it doesn't increase business. The money doesn't make it down to the bottom. More jobs are not created. The holes that were created by the Great Depression are barely fixed by this trickle-down economic practice. And Hoover's going to have to pay for what ultimately happens. Hoover does have one success during his presidency. That is the Hoover Dam. He has the right idea with the Hoover Dam, having a huge construction project that would bring employment to people who were desperately in need of employment in the Southwest. This is going to happen in the early 1930s, but it's not enough. Hoover seems like he started to see the problem that the unemployed need to be employed, and the government is going to need to make that employment possible because business is not doing it itself. But the Hoover Dam was not widespread. It wasn't big enough to bring us out of what needed to happen. It was just like one small piece of what needed to be built. Many Americans are going to demand change to solve the current problem because Hoover's sit back and let it fix itself ideology wasn't doing it. One particular group that is going to push for change is going to be a group of World War I veterans. In 1932, a group is going to go to Washington, D.C., this group being made of the World War I veterans. These veterans are going to become known as the Bonus Army because what they're going to Washington, D.C. to demand is the bonuses that Congress had promised them for their combat in World War I. Now, these bonuses weren't meant to be paid in 1932. They were to be paid down the line. But the Bonus Army is a part of that group of people that doesn't have any money, that has lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost everything. And they see the bonus as something that they're owed from the government and that would help them in their time of need. So without anything to lose, the Bonus Army is going to settle in protest on the lawn of the White House, on the lawn of the Capitol building, demanding that Congress take a vote and vote to give them their bonuses. Congress does not vote to give them their bonuses, and that causes some of them to leave. But like I said, a lot of these people didn't have homes to go back to, so they just kind of stay in the shanty towns that they had built up around the White House. Now, Hoover's not going to like this look of World War I veterans camping out on the White House lawn. So he's going to demand their removal. And in the process of the Army removing these veterans, they're going to use tear gas and excessive force. And pictures of this excessive force used on veterans is going to be captured, and these pictures are going to be spread across newspapers across the United States. And the treatment of the Bonus Army is going to lose Hoover the chance of re-election in 1932. We're going to move into the next section, but what we're going to continue to talk about is Hoover and his last-ditch efforts into the Great Depression. Hoover, like I said, had steps towards the right idea of employing the unemployed, and he creates what's called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation in 1932. He allocates $500 million for loans to banks, corporations, state governments, kind of acting like this conductor of funds towards what needed it the most. As a part of this Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the Golden Gate Bridge is going to be built. The Los Angeles aqueducts are going to be built. So it seems like he realizes that federal aid needs to be used to pull the pieces of the economy out of this Great Depression, but it's not enough. Hoover doesn't extend that federal aid to individuals, where at the beginning of the pandemic, our government started to realize, maybe not enough, but gave the people money through those stimulus checks to kind of shock the nation's economy back to life. That's not happening during the Great Depression. Hoover's going to say we shouldn't put money in the hands of the individuals because that would create government dependency. That would stop innovation. He says the economy has repaired itself in the past. This should be no different. What Hoover couldn't see, what he couldn't take the blinders off to realize, is that this Great Depression was different. That's why we call it the Great Depression. It was not the depressions that we had seen in our economic cycle in the past. We needed to have federal aid for business, for banks, for governments, for individuals in order to take the steps to get us out of this depression. Hoover is going to face off against FDR in the election of 1932. FDR is going to be a young New York governor for the Democratic Party. He is going to promise a new deal for the American people. He also promises that he'll repeal prohibition. These are the two things that the American people needed to hear. They need to hear that there will be change, and they needed to hear that that someone is going to take action against the Great Depression. Now, Hoover is going to run for the Republican Party in the election of 1932, but after the handling of the Bonus Army and the very slow progression out of the Depression, really, we're not making any progression out of the Depression, the people are going to vote for change. They're going to say, you know what? The Republican Party, we stuck with them throughout all of the 1920s. Look at what's happening. It's not changing. Let's cause change for ourselves. Roosevelt's going to win 58% of the popular vote and 89% of the electoral vote. Take a look at that map. I would say that it's very blue, representing this idea that Americans hoped that with a new party in power, a new leader in power, change would soon be to follow. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about with the new approach next time. What does FDR do that's different from Hoover when approaching solving the problem of the Great Depression? Don't forget about your homework tonight. And any questions, let me know.